Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay. Never comes again, another day like yesterday. Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.
Hi, everybody. I am going to do another episode. I'm surprised that I've never spoken on this one because it's a fairly obvious observation for me. Frustratingly, I forgot my adapter for my sound system. Usually I'm recording through an SM7B, which is a great microphone for podcasting, going through a Great River microphone pre to a distressor compressor for a little coloration. Anyway, it's a great chain. It's a great sound system. So, well, right now I'm just going through the microphone in my Mac. It is what it is. I got to just buy an extra one and leave it here so I don't keep bringing it home and bringing it back. Anyway, this one is called something like, this fits into the subset of podcast episodes that I do called Things Your Therapist Wants to Tell You But Can't or Shouldn't or Won't. There are clients that I communicate this to, and there are, of course, clients who understand trauma at a certain level where you don't have to tell them. They're really struggling and frustrated with this pattern. But as a therapist, when you're out in the world, if people find out you're a therapist, sometimes people will speak to you more psychologically. They'll speak to you about their experiences or their family or their cousin or whatever. And if they're not sitting there tasking you to sort of resource them or whatever, I actually enjoy those conversations. I think about this content all the time. I am this way. That's why I became a therapist, not the other way around. But there's something that you'll hear regularly, that there's this truth that people miss about how we choose our romantic attachment partners. So let's take a situation, and someone may be telling you about their cousin or their sister who that gets messier in a situation where it's a sibling. Well, let's say it's the cousin. They're like, yeah, my cousin, was doing great. My aunt and uncle are great. And, and then they got into this relationship with this just full-blown narcissist. And, she was with him for 14 years and he just abused her the entire time, and they had kids and it was just horrible, and she went through so much hell to get herself and the kids out of that situation, and now she's terribly traumatized, and I told her she should go see you or she should go see a therapist because this horrible narcissist that she was with did all of this damage. It was so terrible that this happened to her. Okay. I'm sorry that happened. And this is not about blaming the victim. But this is to acknowledge there is no situation on the face of the planet ever, where someone accidentally creates and maintains a long-term relationship with a toxic level, clinical level personality disorder, whether narcissistic, borderline personality disorder, dependent personality disorder, any of the personality disorders ever, who didn't have some significant coloration of that in one or both of their parents, who didn't have a significant emotional disturbance or dysfunction in their family of origin. Ever. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist on the face of the planet. It doesn't exist. Ever. There's no such thing as, this person had an idealistic childhood with good enough parents. Yeah, they made mistakes, but they were really great parents. And then oh my God, they just didn't know. Like, we're not all therapists. We can't know what a toxic narcissist is. And then ends up in a 15 or a 10-year relationship with that narcissist and has kids with it. That does not exist. That they don't have a parent who's a narcissist. There's no such thing. No one who was not raised by a narcissist ever puts up with that narcissist once that narcissist begins acting the way they act. Okay, I'm not smiling because this is nice or because it's their fault or because I think it's funny. It's because it's mathematically so blindingly clear and obvious, and the reason society is in denial about it. And the reason we're all in denial about it is because of how complicated it makes things, and I'll explain why. Okay, let's say this is someone telling you about their cousin. What's their relationship to this situation? Well, their mom or dad is the sibling of that cousin's mom or dad. They share grandparents. There's something going on in that family system that a bunch of people are in denial about. Some of it's hidden, like significantly hidden. And I've talked about this in other podcast episodes, but you would be shocked at how hard most of normal society is working, literally smoke coming out of their ears, to completely deny and pretend that the level of abuse and dysfunction that is actually going on around them all the time doesn't exist. They will do everything they can to normalize and compress abuse into some norm that they experienced so that they don't have to deal with their cousin or their best friend or blah, 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 that it's right next door to them, or it's right in their own family system, or they just got lucky and their parent, who was raised in the same environment that created that narcissist over there, found some way to heal from it and to be a decent parent so that that cousin didn't have that experience. And they just don't want to see it. They don't want to know because they want to keep their grandparents idealized and they want to keep their auntie and uncle idealized. Now go a step further. All personality disorders start with a fundamental extreme narcissism, extreme emotional immaturity, and extreme selfishness in serving their own needs. There's many different expressions of it: borderline personality disorder, overt narcissist, covert narcissist, blah, 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 whatever. It's a psychologist or a therapist's job to understand what those differences are and to help you with it. But in the end, it's just extreme emotional immaturity and selfishness. Sorry, guys, I completely lost the thread of where I was going, which doesn't happen to me very often when I'm doing these episodes, but I don't even remember what direction I was going because whatever. So to come back to the main point, let's make it more complicated. Oh, I was making the point that society is way, way deeper in denial about what actually goes on. And if you had a fairly reasonably nice childhood, those people put a lot of work into lying about the shit that's going on around them. A lot. I mean, they're just, you see smoke coming out of their ears. They're working super hard. So what happens is people who are talking about, oh, my cousin or my sister or so-and-so or my best friend, you know, married and ended up finding out that it was this personality disorder and had this horrible, just 15 years of hell, is part of the denial. Hey, man, your cousin, best friend, whomever, didn't put up with a toxic narcissist for 15 years because they had good enough parents. They did it because they had one or more than one parent who's a narcissist. A toxic level. Everyone has some level of narcissism, and some parents a little bit more self-interested. Like, what I'm not talking about somewhere on the spectrum. I'm talking about where it tips into a toxic level of self-interest to the point that they really don't care about their child's needs. They might pretend that they're taking care of them, but at very, like, over and over and over at very significantly obvious moments where a child is in desperate need of their needs being cared for, that parent will just full on, with full knowledge, completely ignore it and just not give a shit. Right? Toxic level of narcissism in the parenting. Right. So society's denial around this is why people have this belief that someone can accidentally, oh, this person was so charming and there was no way to know and was wonderful for 2 years and they got married and my God, I can't believe this happened and this just started escalating and how is somebody supposed to know? Blah blah. Okay, I'm gonna give you a facsimile or an image or a model to explain why this is total bullshit. If someone has good enough parents, why this never happens. Fucking never. Let's say you grew up in an environment where the water was always crystal clean and flowing rapidly and clear, mountain streams, and you lived in a verdant valley with lots of fruit and lots of verdant, rich soil, and you could grow lots of crops and vegetables, and you grew up in this environment drinking this clear water and feeling it cleanse your body and just feeling vibrant with energy and health and getting to eat fresh apples and bell peppers and corn out of the garden and zucchini and squash and milk came from a cow that was just well cared for, right? That was your reality. And let's say that person was wandering around and they were young and impressionable, and they came across a situation where someone was like, hey, I have this situation I want to introduce you to. It's going to be great. We're going to love each other. And I live in this beautiful place where it's amazing. Everything you could ever want is there for you. And it's beautiful. And there's running water. And we're going to love each other. We're going to have this great life. And the person is young and impressionable, is like, yeah, that sounds great. And so they fall in love with this person. And the person slowly leads them over 6 months, and finally, a year in, they go to the actual place. And in the actual place, the water's filthy. It has a patina of dirty oil on it. There's sludge in it. It absolutely tastes toxic. It's actually the middle of a junkyard in the middle of a desert, but not a beautiful desert, just a forlorn, dried up place where nothing grows and there's a bunch of trash everywhere. The person who grew up in the verdant valley, what do you think they do? They're not there for 5 fucking seconds. They take one look, they take one taste of the water, they feel the vibrancy and the health immediately being attacked in their body. They feel themselves feeling sick. They look around. They see the absence of, and this person going, oh, it's beautiful. You just wait. All of this. And they're like, you're fucking out of your mind. And they sprint. They are gone. They are out of there. They're fucking out of there. They're out of there. not 2 seconds, the moment the reality shows up as what it is, they are gone. Not 2 seconds. You can't take someone raised with having their needs met and put them in a relationship with someone who attacks them and criticizes them and emotionally manipulates them and never meets their needs. It ain't going to last 6 months. Now, maybe the sex is amazing and it's interesting and they're young. And they might hang out for a year, but they'll be having conversations with their friends like, yeah, the sex is amazing, but this person is crazy. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, it's never going to work. And then they break up with them 6 months in or a year in, and they just had fun sex. That's it. They were never confused about it. Never. Never. No one with healthy parenting that comes close to adequately, not always, but adequately meeting a child's needs, ever gets into a relationship with someone who's manipulative, controlling, self-centered, abusive, ever puts up with it for years and has kids with them, ever. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen ever. The second it stops being fun and that shit shows up, they sprint and it just becomes a war story. Oh my God, like I was so dumb. I was in college having fun. This girl was so hot. This guy was so hot. They seemed fun and blah, blah. And then we were drinking at a party and he saw me talking to this guy or saw me talking to this girl and freaked out and was like, you're a fucking whore. You have terrible boundaries. What's wrong with you? What kind of person would do that? And they're done. It's just a horror story that they tell. And I realize, oh, she was insane. He was insane. Like, oh my God. Like, we actually had sex one more time that night because it was so amazing. And then I never talked to him again. They're out of there. They are out of there. They don't stay with them and they don't have kids with them. They're out of there. It doesn't happen. There's no such thing as someone having a long-term romantic relationship with someone who's abusive, a personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. There's no such thing as someone who had adequate parenting who stays in that relationship. It doesn't exist. So if you're the person who's like, oh, you know, I feel like my friend really is traumatized because of this relationship, you know, blah, blah. If only she had never met that guy. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? If only she had not had the parenting she had. She wouldn't have needed luck to not be, what are you talking about? She needed luck to not put up with that shit for 15 years? Look, this is coming from someone who has spent most of his life in dysfunctional relationships. I'm not judging you. I did it longer than you did. I'm not telling you this because I'm just so smart and I know. I'm telling you this because I'm the idiot who did it. And I'm also telling you as a complex trauma therapist, no one engages in a long-term relationship with an abusive person, a clinically selfish person, a toxic narcissistic a borderline personality disorder person. No one engages in a long-term romantic relationship or friendship with someone like that who didn't have a parent who was that. Because people who didn't have it, like, they would never consider putting up with it. For, like, why? They know the other thing exists. They know that the other thing is the norm for them. That's the norm for them. Okay, so how does this actually happen? How and why does this actually happen? Someone raised by a toxic parent. Toxic parents aren't just selfish, abusive, and hurtful. They are selfish, abusive, and hurtful while telling their child that they're neglecting and hurting, that the neglect and hurt is because their child is a bad person. Okay, I'm making a simple statement saying bad person. That's not what the parent says. The parent says, you're too sensitive. Well, you should get over it. It wasn't that bad. All I ever did was take care of you. They're constantly manipulating the narrative and shaming and blaming the child for the abuse. That's what they do. So that person grows up experiencing many intensely uncomfortable and painful experiences. Many intensely uncomfortable and painful experiences while being blamed for their sorrow and grief and discomfort and emotional responses to that situation. And they grow up with that parent telling them that's your fault. And so they grow up and they meet that toxic borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. And the narcissistic personality disorder slowly starts being mildly verbally abusive, being manipulative, always blaming, right? Never taking responsibility for anything in any of the conflicts. And that person who was raised by that parent has already spent their entire life blaming themselves and accepting blame for anything going wrong. Their entire life. And so all they do is they get confused, they feel traumatized, but what they do with their own trauma reaction to the narcissist is they go, oh, I have PTSD. They send themselves to therapy and they convince themselves if I go to therapy and resolve my PTSD reaction to this fucking asshole, then it'll actually be a good relationship. No, it won't. You can resolve your trauma, but they're still a narcissist. The greatest damage that an abusive parent does is not that they cause chronic PTSD in their child. It is that they convince their child that that chronic PTSD is not an accurate response to what they're experiencing. But it is an accurate response. Both to the narcissist that they meet as an adult and also to what the parents are doing. It is a reasonable nervous system response. It's not a sign that that person's crazy. The PTSD is a sign that you are accurate in how severe the experiences are that you're having. So the reason people stay in those relationships is because they have been gaslit their entire childhood. And then they meet someone who tells them, I have the thing that you've never experienced. I have the verdant valley that person knows exists because they see their friends or other people have it, with clear running water. And I have this and I have that. And I have, a vegetable garden with healthy food, and you're going to thrive and we're going to love one another. And then he or she leads that victim into that junkyard with poison water and oil in the water and no soil that can grow anything. And when the victim goes, wait a minute, this doesn't feel good, they get the same message. Well, that's because you're a mess and you're ruining it. And this would actually be a verdant garden and a verdant valley with sun and clean water if you weren't just such a problem. And then that victim will go to therapy and go, oh, I need to heal my PTSD, and then I'll have the verdant valley. But they won't. They can heal their PTSD and go back to that valley, and it's still a pile of shit. It's still a goddamn junkyard with poison water. How do you know that they've healed their trauma? Well, once their trauma's healed, they look and they go, what? Where's a fucking junkyard with poison water? Why the fuck would I ever do that? What do you think, I'm nuts? Go fuck yourself. That's when they've healed. So many people with complex PTSD who had abusive parents will go to therapy thinking that the problem with their relationship is that they have PTSD, and that if they fix themselves, they'll go back to their relationship and it will be the verdant valley. But it never was. It was a junkyard with poison fucking water. And when they heal, they go, oh, why the fuck would I want to do that? That's insane. People with complex trauma go to therapy to fix themselves because they don't want to acknowledge that as a unhealed, wounded person, they are blood in the water for all the toxic externalizers. People who are deeply wounded but who externalize then project the toxicity and the abuse outward instead of inward at themselves. And so they just look for people who are marks. When I say look, they're not consciously looking. They just smell it. It's like an animal instinct, right? Guys, I just took the family camping over the weekend and got a really bad flu, like chills, elevated fever, was literally 2 days in the cabin, just like shivering, shaking, blah, blah, blah. Finally recovered by the morning we were leaving, packed up and came back. So my brain is pretty fucking mushy. I don't have the conciseness that I usually have, but I think I made the point. So I'll just state it once again. And if I end up remembering that there was a lot more I wanted to elaborate on, I will do so. But this is another episode of things your therapist wants to tell you but may not be able to, or you may not be ready to hear, but that I'm saying here on this podcast, is that no one enters a long-term friendship or romantic relationship with a personality disorder who did not have a personality disorder for a parent. No one. It doesn't exist on the face of the planet. Because people who grew up in a green, beautiful, verdant valley with clean flowing water, the second they started experiencing the junkyard with poison water, would be like, what the fuck? You're full of shit, man. You're out of your mind. And they're out of there. They are the fuck out of there because they know green, verdant valleys exist. Okay, maybe they were young, they didn't understand, maybe the sex was great, maybe that person seemed cool, but they get over it fucking fast when it violates their basic human needs. The person who's been gamed and gaslit by their parent or parents their entire childhood has been raised with this deep, profoundly deep, unconscious belief that whatever goes wrong is essentially because they're wrong, there's something wrong with them. And they become a target for every goddamn narcissist, borderline personality disorder, trauma externalizing asshole on the face of the planet. And they will engage long-term relationships with those people because it sets them up to repeat. They want to believe that verdant valleys exist, but they've never experienced it. They can see other people seem to have it, but they've never experienced it, and they will enter into relationships with narcissists who will sell them a pretty picture. And then when the junkyard, the greasy, toxic junkyard shows up with dirty water and no soil to grow food in, and they're emotionally starving and they can't get a cool, clean drink of water, the narcissist will tell them the same thing that their parent told them. It's this way because you're a problem and you're making it this way. And that person, that victim, will go to therapy to fix themselves because they will be convinced that they're experiencing a junkyard with toxic water because they have trauma. But the truth is if they healed their trauma, they would realize it's just a fucking junkyard with toxic water. Go fuck yourself. You're an idiot. If you want to live in that, go ahead. I'm not doing it. And they will move on. That's when they have healed from their complex trauma. Not when they've developed the ability to put up with these assholes. Being healed does not mean you've developed the ability to diplomatically deal with assholes. It annoys the fuck out of me that modern psychology messages have filtered out into the oh my God, guys, my brain is so fucking mushy today. Into the population. And people literally, especially traumatized people, have literally internalized this message. If I was healed, I could convert every interaction into this beautiful interaction. It's like, no, you can't. When the other person is a sick, unhealed fuckhead, you can't stop them from making that a shit interaction. All you do is enable them. When someone makes interactions shit, move the fuck on. They're autonomous beings. They have the ability and the right to do that. Your ability and right is simply to go, yeah, not my thing. Not my thing. I'm going to move on. And remember, I'm going to repeat this point for the last time. The reason the normies work so fucking hard to not see this and to tell this narrative of like, oh my God, like my best friend and she married this, blah, blah, is because they are often adjacent to this kind of trauma and toxicity. And they were lucky enough to get an experience that allowed them a good enough childhood that they could go ahead and thrive and develop resiliency. It doesn't mean they don't suffer. They do. It doesn't mean that they don't have really hard parts of their life. They do. But they got enough. And they don't want to see it. And so they convince themselves of this narrative that there's a possibility of someone just through bad luck being confused about someone is and getting tricked by it and then being too far into it. And then 5 years later is getting pretty bad. But then they got pregnant and now there's a kid. Shut the fuck up. I feel conflicted about this, but I'll share with you how deeply, profoundly full of shit society is. I'll share one of my more vulnerable abuses that I experienced at the hands of my mother. Between the ages of maybe 4 and 8, she would do my sister's laundry. Whatever happened, like it was quite often that my bedding was not done. And because I often wet the bed, there was a plastic sheet on a cot and then later on a mattress, whatever. And she would send me up to my bed and I would have to take my clothes off down to my underwear because that was the rule, blah, blah, blah. And I would sleep on a plastic sheet in cold Oregon winters with no pajamas and no blankets. There was a couple of years of absolute horror and desperation. I would spend 6 to 8 hours in abject terror. And the cold would get so intense that it would become physically painful. And I would spend a couple of hours of violent shivering, my teeth clattering together, crying, calling for my mother, calling my sister. My mother would get angry. I would turn my light on and try to get her to come. She would refuse to come. She would get angry. This went on for years. And at some point, like at 2 or 3 in the morning, out of absolute desperation, I would urinate on myself because it was warm, and I would like wrap myself in the plastic sheet to try to fall asleep. And she knew that these things would happen, because every morning she would come up, and if I didn't wake up, well, I was not sleeping at night, obviously, so it would be very hard to wake up. In the morning, I would fall asleep once the sun came up and it was warm enough for me to fall asleep. So I'd fall asleep 5:30 in the morning, 5 or 5:30, 4:30 in the morning, and then we'd have to get up at 5:30 or 6 for school. Well, she would get me up by coming upstairs. Now she's able to come upstairs, right? And she would dump a pan of water on me, which means that those nights that this went on for years, that she knew and never did anything to change it, right? And she would wake me up by dumping a pan of water on me to force me to wake up and get out of bed. Okay, so this is significantly sick, right? My mother was sick. This is significant. And by the way, this is not the worst thing that she did, right? Just to communicate to you how profoundly sick she was. In my community, in my family, right? I've talked about this. I spent probably a decade trying to talk about this. Then I separated, blah, blah, blah. This doesn't exist. And if you're a person who's in this kind of position, right? You need to understand how profound the denial is in society. As long as I struggled desperately with mental health issues that resulted from that, and again, that was not the worst thing that she did to me. But if you really want to understand that all the years that I struggled with really intense mental health issues, it was completely sold by her. It was just me, right? I always had problems, blah, blah, blah. And society buys all of this. There's literally not a single person in my family. I'm one of 5. One of 5 siblings. There's not a single sibling who believes that that's true. I experienced it for 3 years. And again, that is not the worst thing that she ever did to me. My siblings are not horrible people. There's no one in our community who has any idea who that woman is. Not a soul. No, she's a saint. People, I'm not telling you this to put my vulnerable content out there or to elicit, I have my support system. I did my work. I'm telling you to tell you that's not an unusual situation. People who have those kinds of experiences, like me, exist in a society that absolutely lies to themselves about what we experience. Lies, and again, that image of smoke coming out their ears just works tirelessly to make it not true and to compress it, make it something, for example, in that case, because I was a young boy and I was deeply traumatized, I was wetting my bed anyway. So of course that would totally be sold as oh, he just got confused, and well, he wet his bed, he probably feels ashamed, and he made up this story, and oh, he was probably afraid. Well, we probably should have gone up. He was afraid of the dark, but we didn't understand. I mean, an extreme act of neglect and abuse will be mealy-mouthed and lied about until it gets compressed into something that's well, that wasn't optimal, but it's an overwhelmed mother with 5 kids, which is a complete lie. She absolutely knew that it was happening for years while it was happening. She came up and saw that it was reality, and it repeatedly happened over and over and over for hundreds of times. Then there's this compressed lie. Guys, you need to understand, okay, if you're a person like me that you experience these kind of, you need to understand society is absolutely profoundly invested in lying about these things because it makes their lives nice and convenient. My siblings are not bad people, but they had relatively nice lives based on believing the lie and operating and taking what was offered by my parents once they realized, oh shit, like we're sick, we really fucked up with these 2 siblings out of the 5. They created something else and went, oh, these things never happened, right? Well, that's what society's doing, is they're just sitting here, but it is right next to you. It's right next to you, okay? So what this means is the reason people are saying, oh, this happened and this person had this relationship and, you know, blah, 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 it destroyed them. And if they'd never had this relationship, blah, blah, is because society needs to believe that parents are not doing this. They need to believe that parents are not molesting their children. They need to believe that parents are not abusing their children. My community needs to believe that my parents weren't absolutely sociopaths when I was a kid. They need to believe that. They revere them. They revere them. It feels wonderful. They're a wonderful part of the community. They've helped many people in the community. They don't want that truth. They don't want it, right? So, to come back to the original point, no one engages in a long-term friendship or romantic relationship with a personality disorder who was not raised by a personality disorder. These are things that your therapist wants to tell you but often can't. All right, you guys. Have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you next time. Take care.
Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.